Welcome back, everybody. In this session, we will hear from 4 speakers. The first 2 from Hamburg Port Authority on port strategy for growth, and also Hamburg's plans for their World Conference next year. The second 2 speakers will bring us all up to speed on the latest news on the proposed mandatory weighing of containers, a very popular subject with us all, not, and the effectiveness of weigh-in-motion scales at the terminal gate. So first up, Port of Hamburg, the biggest seaport in Germany, the second biggest container terminal in Europe, and the 11th biggest container port in the world. Please welcome the port's Head of Strategy, Lutz Birke.
Thank you, Bob. So, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Bob, for your kind introduction. We heard a lot of bigger vessels this morning, but we always spoke about the vessels and the water side, and a bit about the container terminals. We as Port Authority are very interested in the land side as well, in particular on our infrastructure and how we can manage the peaks we will get with these fancy vessels on the roads and railways. So I would like to tell you about what the Port of Hamburg is doing with regard to the topic of our session, boosting port effectiveness or dealing with growing numbers of goods and traffic volume in the port. Have you ever been to the Port of Hamburg? I'm sure many of you will have made a stopover in Hamburg during one of your business trips to talk to clients and business partners in Hamburg. Perhaps you were able to spare some time and look at a few of the countless innovative models, projects in Hamburg, the smart city, as it is proud to call itself. Some of these projects are being realized in the port, and I hope I will be able to whet your appetite in the next few minutes. I've brought along a picture of the Port of Hamburg that shows its location right in the heart of the city. The core challenge we are facing due to this location is to increase value creation when the available space is limited. The port is surrounded by residential areas, and we have important transport axes like motorways within and through the port. This is a very special situation we have in Hamburg and is challenging us with the following special aspects. We have an increase of the sustainability and quality requirements of our customers. We have an increase of the traffic volume in the port. A big share of that is individual traffic. We have an increase of the quantities of goods. And we get the pressure from our neighbors and the expanding city of Hamburg to reduce the emissions, air pollution, CO2 and noise, for example. In these fields, we had and we have to find answers for our customers and the public side of Hamburg. What we have to do in the end of the day is to secure the location of the Port of Hamburg. Resulting from these challenges and our special situation, the aims are increase the efficiency of the whole port, decrease the environmental effects from the port, and save money for our customers and ourselves. To achieve these aims, we have worked up the concept Smart Port. Smart Port has 4 focuses: energy, logistics, maintenance of the infrastructure, and recently cruise industry. The first focus is a strong pillar of the concept. It's called Smart Port Energy. In this pillar, we identified 3 clusters. In the first cluster, the port will become a flagship port for renewable energies. Dependence on conventionally generated energy will be decreased by expanding the use of alternative energy sources, for example, windmills or solar panels. In this field, we want to focus on innovative technologies if and where possible. The second cluster aims at lowering energy consumption and emissions by increasing energy efficiency and providing intelligent infrastructures. The port area, with its large logistics and industrial facilities, certainly offers potential to increase energy efficiency. Moreover, energy consumption will in future have to be brought in line with the amount of energy produced from renewable sources. Matching production and demand requires the integration of various factors: power production, consumption facilities, new energy storage systems, and adequate communication technologies. In the third cluster, we want to promote innovative and eco-friendly mobility to reduce emissions effectively. Commercial and individual traffic in the Port of Hamburg offer a huge potential of emission reduction. The most important goals are to avoid unnecessary traffic, to permanently shift traffic from road to rail and waterways, and finally to reduce or even entirely avoid harmful emissions. For example, we will build the first onshore power facility for cruise vessels in Europe, called Ironing Facility. We got the money from the city of Hamburg and a little bit from the European Union, and we will start this project in the next days. Furthermore, we will develop the frame for an LNG infrastructure in the port to supply vessels, feeder vessels, port traffic and trucks, like other ports do as well. Altogether, we have identified 15 topics in this pillar with a lot of projects behind them. What did we achieve last year with this concept? Since January 2013, we have finished 24 measures in the port community with an annual greenhouse gas reduction of roughly 41,100 tons. Furthermore, 48 measures are being implemented. The expected annual greenhouse gas reduction of these measures is 24,400 tons. In this cluster, one of the goals is to install 7 more windmills in the port area by mid of 2015. Last year, we got 1 new. 10 more facilities are in the approval process. In this case, we work strongly together with the State Ministry of Environmental Affairs, which is in charge of the approvals, as well as with the companies which want to install the windmills. What we also did in 2013 is we checked all the roofs in the port for the installation of solar panels. With the so-called Hamburg Solar Atlas, we checked the roofs regarding the positioning of the roof's surface and whether they are shadow-free. After that, we gave this information to the companies and asked them to install solar panels. We have achieved some aims in this pillar, Smart Port Energy, but we haven't reached the finish yet. The second pillar is Smart Port Logistics. But why Smart Port Logistics? Our principle is same amount of area, more goods. As you were well aware, the port is incredibly complex systems. Thousands of different people and trucks seem to be milling about without any apparent purpose. And because all of the milling about, they find themselves stuck in jam. No doubt, they are all trying to optimize their processes, but each of them in their own respective fields only. We end up with multiple systems that don't communicate with each other. And that's exactly where Smart Port Logistics comes into the picture. A smart port is what we define as an intelligent port, a port that is constantly looking for a better, more sustainable, more cost-effective solution. You may well imagine that data processing plays a central role in it. Smart Port Logistics, for example, is written on these fancy smartphones and tablets, one of the latest disruptive innovations. I'm sure most of you have brought along at least one such device. Now imagine that you are moving around in the port and this device provides you with real-time, custom-tailored information. we have already initiated a wide range of projects that, step by step, will make the port more intelligent. These projects take account of disruptive innovations and, almost in passing, help shape the port in a sustainable way. I want to give you some examples what I mean. Among others, our aim is to install an intelligent port traffic system, a control center that operates across the various modes of transport. Currently, we have 3 different control centers, but we want to combine these to one and include information about our movable infrastructure, like bridges. Based on the data collected, the system behind the port traffic center creates forecasts and transmits this information in real time and cluster-tailored to the users. We plan to offer the relevant applications too to complement this information. With this project, we want to increase the efficiency of the whole infrastructure, waterways, railways and roads of our port and, in the end of the day, the capacity of the existing infrastructure. We are very interested in this topic because we as Port Authority in Hamburg are responsible for the whole infrastructure of the port, roads, waterways and railways too. So we operate, maintain, build and rebuild the infrastructure of the whole port, and this is very expensive. The Port Monitor, another project, will show the current traffic situation to our port traffic center as well as to the users of the application. To be able to get the right information we need for the Port Monitor as well as for the users, we use the possibilities of the Internet of Things. To expand the Internet of Things, we have already installed 300 traffic sensors and laid 270 kilometers of fiber optic cables in the port. We also have established several hotspots that we use to interlink the individual intelligent modes of transport and the motorists. Another of our projects is intelligent car park management for trucks to increase the capacity on already existing parking areas. The most difficult situation we have regarding car park space for trucks is on evenings and during nights. Truck drivers look for parking slots to take a rest or to wait until they are able to bring their boxes to the container terminals. But most parking spaces in the port or in the surrounding areas are overloaded in these periods. These bottlenecks exist in particular from Monday until Thursday. Smart parking will ensure that trucks park in neat rows without leaving gaps and will allot free parking slots to the drivers. So we are able to increase the capacity of our parking space by 30%. What we also do is to visualize the traffic situation at our movable bridges as well as at the construction sites. We want to use this information in addition to the real-time situation as a forecast. The construction sites will send their status permanently. So we get the information about the repair time as well as the current traffic situation at the construction sites. The other topic is the traffic situation in front of the movable bridges. The idea is that the bridges inform the users and the traffic center at an early stage when it will open for crossing vessel traffic. So the users are able to change their route and the port traffic center is able to provide, via the Port Monitor, recommendations for alternative routes. These 2 projects alone will reduce unnecessary traffic in the port, adjust traffic flows early on, for example, if construction sites are ahead or bridges are open, and optimize the flow of information between the parties involved. That way, we ensure that already existing infrastructure facilities will be optimally used and traffic flows remain smooth. On top, we mitigate noise and air pollution. In this way, we contribute to a sustainable development of the Port of Hamburg and for sure of the city of Hamburg. For our aim to sense and to avoid traffic jams, we need a huge and fast brain in the background, big data. We need a lot of sensors and ICT systems to collect information and data. We also need a very fast brain to analyze these data and to provide the right information in the right time and in the right places for our customers to enable them to make the right decision. We at the Port of Hamburg already contribute to realizing this vision. By means of intelligent infrastructure, we are perfecting the parts of the supply chain which we have an influence on. By this, we ensure maximum benefit for our customers and simultaneously reducing traffic-related emissions. I am very certain that you too are in the midst of optimizing your company or your port, procedures and the flow of information. What is important though is that companies that form a part of the supply chain connected to and cooperate with other partners, that we share our ideas and talk to each other as we are doing it today, that the way we can find all encompassing solutions and supply chain processes can be optimized in a concerted effort. But our vision goes far beyond the idea of a smart port in Hamburg. We believe that we have to look beyond the boundaries of the port and consider the supply chain as a whole. Our vision is to create an information platform similar to the one we are currently developing in Hamburg, an intelligent traffic management system which collects and prepares data on the traffic situation as it presents itself on rail, road and water. Based on these data, the system then calculates the fastest, most cost-efficient cross-regional transport route, taking into account all modes of transport. The decision maker, for instance, the person based in Shanghai, may receive the following message from the platform: dock workers on strike in France, or disruption on the Rhine rail corridor. At the same time, the system will suggest other routes, options that take account of these disruptions and display alternative solutions. Based on this information, our person in Shanghai can decide to send the goods not via E, but via B to their final destination. To achieve that, we will have to provide for infrastructure that allows us to make or to reverse decisions at any point in time. We will have to find a way to anticipate capacities and estimate the transport situation to be able to decide on the best possible route. The route data should be constantly matched against the data available on the platform and updated in real time, even if the goods are already on the way. In the event of disruptions, the mode of transport can then be changed as needed. This requires partners that are able to look at the supply chain as a whole. Ladies and gentlemen, in our point of view, Smart Port Hamburg benefits our environment as well as the companies which are working in and with the port. It saves time, money, energy, and other resources of the port and of our customers. And of course, it reduces emissions. The conclusion is, ecology and economy alike benefit from the opportunities of innovative environmental technology. In June 2015, we want to present the first, or rather the next results of our projects during the IAPH World Ports Conference in Hamburg, serving both as a status report and a glance into the future. Be excited, be our guests. Thank you very much for your attention. So I'm sharing my time with my colleague Sabine Stüben. She wants to give you the latest news about our conference in Hamburg. So please welcome Ms. Sabine Stüben.
Thank you, Lutz. Hello, everybody. First of all, I would like to take the chance to thank you, Grant, and as well congratulate you for this great conference. I know for sure what it means to organize such a conference. So what about give him a hand? Did the jingle already work? So, those of you who were in Los Angeles might already know this jingle. I'm very happy to present to those of them who were not there, and I hope very much all of you will be in Hamburg. City of Hamburg calling at the Smart Port. I'm very happy that Lutz already told you what this means for us, for the very special place of Hamburg, Smart Port, being a leading port for those subjects. I'm quite sure that you already know when the conference will take place, and you don't have to write down because we put a flyer for everyone on the seat, and you may keep it and put it into your diary once you get back to your office. And in addition to that, we also put a luggage tag on your seat, so the only thing you have to do is pack your suitcase and come to Hamburg. So, what is waiting for you? My beautiful hometown, Hamburg, located in the northern part of Germany. And as you can see over there, it's a very green town. We have pretty much trees and a lot of water and so many interesting things to see. I will promise you, we show you the most important ones. The Congress will take place in the Congress Center, so-called CCH, which is located right in the center of the city. And the good thing is, it is a very fast or very close walking distance to everything which might be interesting for you. Could you arrange for this, please? Thank you. We booked 2 hotels as the basis for the conference, and when you step on our website of the conference, you will find 2 links leading you to those hotels. Both of them are very much in the center of the city, only almost 1 minute walking distance away from each other, so you can share your friends or the time with your friends. In the Marriott will be held the committees and the early reception. Both of the hotels provide you with restaurants if you want, and bars of course, if you want to spend additional time with your friends or your colleagues in order to have a discussion. And as I promised you, we will take you around the city and show you all our famous sites. For example, you will see the Hamburg Town Hall, where we have some sort of reception, and of course the Chamber of Commerce, where we will have a dinner. And these both are very old buildings, very famous, very well known, and we will lead you through these buildings, and you can have a sneak peek in order to get hungry of Hamburg. Our gala event will take place in the so-called Fish Auktionshalle, which is an auction hall, 120 years old, a historic site, right on the board of the port, so you will have the very famous view of to the port, and yes, I promise you, we'll have some fun there. For the accompanying person, we will provide a mixture of culture, But as I know very much, you also want to do the shopping once you get to Hamburg, because Hamburg has very famous shopping sites, and it is also very close, all in the center of the city, short walking distance. Once you have in each hand 3 bags, you can get back to the hotel and go back shopping. So, this is the moment where we launch a call for papers. If you have the feeling you want to present your topics at the premier event of the port industry, please do so. On our website, we provide you with the details concerning the call for papers, also an instruction, and I will be more than happy if some of you will attend the conference as a presenter in order to hold a speech, or let us know and share your very last information, challenges, and so on. I once again want to invite you to our website. We are going to provide you with all upcoming subjects and topics. Okay. And you also can learn our so-called Plattdeutsch. You know Plattdeutsch? Plattdeutsch used to be spoken in Hamburg in former times, and we are going to provide you with some words you really, really need, as for example, moin. Moin you can use the whole day long. Moin, which means good morning. Moin, which means good afternoon. Moin, which means good night. And the one you will meet will say moin, moin. And how to pronounce, you also find on the website. Or, if you might have already, or if not, you should apply for our newsletter. I think you already met both of my team. Christian Pieper, please get up. And Kasper von Blomberg, also, please get up. Those two were the hosts of the booth during this conference. And if you didn't meet them so far, you should go to our booth, put your business card into the box, then you already applied for our newsletter, and the best thing is you can win a 2-night stay in Hamburg. You also can find a TV movie. We have our own movie for our port, which is called Hafen TV, which we produce with a local station and release it once a month. And all those stories, information, surroundings about the port you can find on our website as well. And if you want, you can, also have a view on the gallery where we provide you with the photos, for example, from Los Angeles. And once we finish the conference, of course, also with the photos of the conference of Hamburg. So once again, the booth outside on the right hand in the corner. Please visit my colleagues. They'll be more than happy to give you more information and collect your business cards.
Flat top, he come grooving up slowly. He got
Get up, please.
juju eyeball. He one holy roller. He got hair down to his knee.
Hey!
Got to be a joker. He just do what he please.
Come together right now.
Here when the shoe shine, he got torch and
Everybody.
football. He got monkey finger. He shoot Coca-Cola. He say, I know you, you know me. together right now.
Okay. Thank you. Now you have some sort of feeling. Keep it warm, and bring it to Hamburg. Thank you.
Thank you, Lutz. Thank you, Sabine. To put that last bit of music in context, Hamburg hosted a night at the LA conference, and it was a big night under the shuttle, and they had a Beatles sound-alike, look-alike band. It was absolutely brilliant, and it was so good for a couple of reasons. One was very interesting watching Grant dance. But the other thing is that if people hadn't let their hair down before that, they sure as hell did that night. It was a great night. So thank you both. The World Conference, as you can see, is going to be a little bit bigger than ours, and that's the way World Conferences are. And I just highly recommend your attendance to that event. Now to a subject that's been raised time and again by the maritime community over the past 10 or more years, overweight containers or misdeclared containers. Our next speaker will go into the details, but many of you are aware that the IMO's Dangerous Goods, Solid Cargo and Container Subcommittee has approved proposed changes to the Safety of Life at Sea Convention that require mandatory verification of container weights before they're loaded on ships. The next step happens when the Maritime Safety Committee considers the recommendations in a few weeks' time, and if approved, it then is considered for adoption at its November meeting. For the IAPH and other shipping and transport peak bodies, it's been a long journey to get to this point, all lobbying very hard over the years for container weighing regulation. Shane Hobday is NSW Port's General Manager of Operations, but for years was a member of the IAPH Port Safety and Security Subcommittee, which has done so much great work on this important issue. So please give Shane a big welcome. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's a very hard act to follow. I'm not a very good dancer either, so I joined Grant's club. I'm very pleased, as Bob mentioned, to actually speak on this topic, having been involved in the Port Safety and Security Committee of IAPH for many years, and this has been very much the thrust of that committee, and very pleased to provide an update on the container weighing shifting to regulations. I'll be just covering why and how has IAPH been involved, the draft SOLAS amendments and guidelines for the verified gross mass of containers, and the current schedule for the amendments to enter into force. Why and how has IAPH been involved? Overweight or misdeclared weights of containers pose a safety and operational risk for the entire logistics chain. They lead to vessels being improperly stowed, which can adversely affect stability and possible loss of containers overboard. They can cause damage in terminal handling equipment. They can pose an injury and safety risk to dock workers while containers are being handled in container yards, and contribute to accidents on highways and railways. And my former colleague from Sydney Ports will be actually talking on specific initiatives in New South Wales around what the state has done to actually mitigate the risks on the road transport side around measuring weights. As Bob said, IAPH has been actively lobbying for international requirements for the weighing containers for over 5 years in a very robust manner. Back in May 2011 at the World Conference in Busan, IAPH passed a resolution calling on the IMO and the ILO to require the mandatory weighing of containers at the origin of the shipment. In December 2011, IAPH joined with the shipping industry, the World Shipping Council, International Chamber of Shipping and the Baltic and International Maritime Council to work with the IMO on the container weight issue. In 2012, the IAPH Port Safety and Security Committee actually carried out a survey of the IAPH members to actually get feedback on this particular issue, what initiatives each port were taking as far as weights, how big an issue it was, and it was very interesting, the very strong feedback we got from members. It was a significant issue in ports, a safety issue. In 2012, June, there was a formal proposal on weighing containers submitted to the IMO by the countries of Denmark, Netherlands, US, BIMCO, IAPH, ICS, ITF and World Shipping Council. It accompanied, or there was an accompanying press release which IAPH, International Chamber of Shipping and also World Shipping Council and BIMCO titled Maritime Industry asks IMO to require the weighing of containers. So very active, pushing the IMO in this direction. In September 2013, prior to the meeting of the Dangerous Goods, Solid Cargoes and Container Subcommittee, the group IAPH, International Chamber of Shipping and World Shipping Council also put out another press release. Shipping industry urges the IMO to approve container weight verification requirements. And then, as Bob outlined, in mid-September 2013, the IMO subcommittee finally supported draft amendments to the SOLAS Chapter 6 requiring the mandatory verification of the gross mass of containers. There'll be amendments to SOLAS Chapter 6 and that'll also be supported by guidelines. Specifically, the guidelines outline where these requirements will apply and will apply to containers, tank containers and flat racks. The principles are that a shipper is responsible for obtaining the verified gross mass of a container, and most importantly, no container should be loaded onto a ship unless the master and the terminal have the verified gross mass. Methods of weighing, the container can be weighed in total, or the individual components, packages, can be weighed and aggregated with the tare weight of the container. That includes the pallets and other packaging items that might be used. The shipper is responsible to communicate verified gross mass of the container to the ship's master, the terminal representative, in time to be used in preparation of the stowage plan. The document communicating the verified gross mass is to be authorised by a shipper's representative. Now, this can be communicated by EDI, so it's a very simple process. Unfortunately, there is a glitch in this process in that the contract of cartage is between the shipper and the shipping company, and not the shipper and the port terminal, so it may require the ship's master to actually communicate that verified gross mass back to the terminal prior to loading. So the terminal may not necessarily get it in the first instance. The weighing equipment, scales, weigh bridges, lifting equipment and other associated equipment should meet the applicable accuracy standards of the port state. So it will be the responsibility of the individual port state to police this issue around the accuracy of this measurement. Discrepancies in the gross mass. The verified gross mass replaces all other gross mass measurements, weights that have been taken beforehand. Discrepancies between the verified gross mass of a container prior to delivery and verified gross mass at the container terminal is resolved by using the container terminal figure, so the last figure obtained. Containers that exceed the maximum permissible gross mass should not be loaded onto the ship. And containers should not be loaded until verified gross mass is obtained by the master or terminal and that can be can be obtained by the master or the terminal separate to the shipper if the shipper hasn't provided it, so they can actually independently find out that verified gross mass. And back to sort of the underlying principle of SOLAS, the master has the ultimate decision in all these instances. Ship's master should only accept a container on board if satisfied that it can be safely transported, and that's covered in the Code of Practice for stowage, cargo stowage and securing. Next steps, mid-May, as Bob actually alluded to, the Maritime Safety Committee will consider the draft amendments to SOLAS, and we believe we'll adopt them. There will be a IMO circular issued in September 2014, letter to member states advising of the amendments, proposed amendments. The Maritime Safety Committee will again consider any outstanding objections in their November meeting, and we believe the actual amendments will enter into force in July 2016. This has been a long process. It's then actually up to the port states to adopt those amendments into regulation. That's the same for any amendments to SOLAS, to any other conventions under the IMO. So it's been a long process. It has some way to go, but it's very positive. And personally, I'd like to congratulate IAPH for its stance on this particular issue, ensuring that we've got a workable solution, and making sure that ultimately the shipper is responsible. The shipper is responsible for packing that container. She needs to provide that weight, that accurate weight at the outset, so that we are all protected throughout the logistics chain. Thank you.
Something that many of us have been reading about but may not be had so much detail, so it's good to know what's coming, and it's not far away, so thank you. Of course, there are ports in the world that are weighing containers at the gate, mostly import boxes, and Port Botany here in Sydney is one of them. Sydney Ports introduced mandatory weighing in June 2012 when state authorities determined that the number of excess weight breaches at the port represented an unacceptable risk to all road users. The man whose team succeeded in overcoming considerable challenges to introduce the mandatory system is General Manager of Port Botany Landside Improvement Strategy, Steve Gunn, and let's make him feel welcome.
Thank you, Bob. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. If I send you to sleep over the next half an hour, I will be really pleased, because let me tell you that when we were going through this process, it was far from boring. We have this legislation around chain of responsibility here in Australia, and I know that similar legislation exists in a lot of other countries around the world. And it's about everybody in the supply chain having responsibility for what occurs in that supply chain. They're responsible for the mass, the dimension and load restraint, and I'll touch on load restraint, which goes even a bit further than what Shane was talking about before, about what IMO have been addressing recently. Speed and driver fatigue. And as I said, everybody in that supply chain is responsible in one form or another in that chain. And every participant must take steps to ensure that there is no breaches of the law. Here in New South Wales, the Roading Enforcement Authority is Roads and Maritime Services, or RMS. And when they look for continual breaches of regulations, or they're looking for non-compliance or areas of legislation that need tweaking, fine-tuning, they're looking at a number of different things. Evidence of systemic and habitual breaches, people that are continually doing it because they have the wrong processes in place. Evidence of continued unfair commercial advantage as a result of breaches, and we've seen examples of that, and a good example is import tiles coming in from Italy. Imagine tiles being a heavy article sitting in containers, and one road carrier says, yeah, I can carry your heavy box. The other guy says, no, it's overweight. The RMS are continually looking for those where there's unfair commercial advantage as well. Obviously, with road accidents, risks and damage to safety and infrastructure, it's quite amazing the amount of damage that's caused to the roads in a country due to overweight trucks, and particularly overweight axle groups. And then obviously they're looking for that final bit is unreasonable demands. A customer saying to its carrier, I want you to be here in half an hour, when they know full well that it takes an hour to do the journey. RMS looked at the activities around port botany, and as Bob said previously, they concluded that there was some of this going on. So in 2009, they issued a couple of these nasty things on the two stevedores that were present in the port at that time. Improvement notices. And those improvement notices stated quite clearly that the stevedores, as a loader of a container onto a vehicle, and their position in the chain of responsibility, they had to take appropriate action to prevent a breach of any overloading by vehicles that have loaded in their terminals. So they put it fairly and squarely on the stevedores and said, you guys cannot load heavy containers onto trucks and allow those trucks to go out on the public roads of New South Wales. Now, we as an organisation had spent some considerable time and energy around improving that landside interface to ensure that we were getting a smooth flow of containers out the gate, trucks in and out of the terminals, and there was no congestion in the port. We'd achieved that to a great extent. What we didn't want was a weighing process that was going to slow up that supply chain any. So we were quite concerned. And so we jumped in after discussion with DP World and Patrick, the two stevedores, and said, we need to lead some process around here with all the stakeholders to get a process in place that's not going to hold up the supply chain too much, and yet deliver what we need to deliver for safety and for the requirements of the improvement notice. That process involved, I guess, about 20 or 30 people at different times, right from the minister. The minister actually sat in a couple of our working groups, and we went through the processes, and the long and short of it, come June, July 2012, the weigh and motion scales at Patrick and DP World were turned on. Now let's skip back a bit. Operation Asset was a process that RMS was running, and they set up their portable weigh scales outside the gates of the stevedores, particularly outside of DP World, and weighed every truck that came out of those gates. Three separate enforcement periods over a period of 12 months, and they found this number of breaches. 1,500 odd vehicles inspected. Gross weight, so total overweights, 3% were less than 5% overloaded, 2% were substantial. But the issue that we really had was in fact the axle weight groups. And you can see there 7% or 33 vehicles were severely or substantially overweight, and 28 were severe. That's greater than 20% above the allowable limits. Since the weigh and motions came into being, we have gone from compliant, and these are just groups, axle groups, not total gross weight, but we have moved from some 75% to 88% compliant on axle groups. The good thing, and I'll touch on this in a little while, the good thing was in fact the gross mass, so total heavy containers, really changed substantially. And we went from 15% gross mass problems down to 2%. And that happened probably over a period of 2 months. If I go back there, you'll notice the comment on the bottom of that page, container packing methods changed. Had one little, one carrier, it happens to probably be one of the largest carriers servicing the port, rang and whinged in my ear and said, you know, we've been carting these refrigerated containers full of small goods that come in from the States. We've been carting them for years and we've been carting them legally, and now you're telling me my drive axle group is over and I'm illegal on the roads. And I said, well, let's go back. 3 years you've been carting them. Let me tell you, for the past 3 years you've been carting them illegally. Oh, but I can't change it because the way I've got to have the container loaded, you know, I can't get a different truck that's going to get those axle groupings right. They went back to the customer, the shipper, back in the States, and it only took them about 10 days. The next shipment that came through, they'd changed the way they packed the container. The container was no lighter, and yet it completely complied on all axle groupings. And that was a good news story. And there was instances of that, more than that one. Operation Steel, another enforcement category, and so go a bit further than what Shane was talking about. A major concern to the enforcement people here in New South Wales, and a major concern to us and every motorist, I believe, that travels the roads of New South Wales, is actually the restraint of the product inside of containers. Operation Steel was named Operation Steel after an 18-tonne coil of steel went through the side of a container and went through 3 lanes of traffic and into the tide, into the harbour. Fortunately, no other motorist was there to be collected by this 18-tonne of steel as it shot out of the side of the container. Why did it do it? It wasn't restrained properly inside of the container. It wasn't packed properly. Now, a lot of people in the community, in the logistics community, were saying, you know, it's all these import containers that are the problem. It's all these import. That was an export box. That was an export container leaving Australia. So there's problems in our own backyard here of packing containers correctly. Another instance which happened probably about 18 months ago, a laden container with sawn timber, sawn hardwood inside, went round a corner. The driver was not necessarily going too fast. The timber stacks inside the container moved sideways, accelerated the truck's turning momentum, tipped it on its side, fell on a car and killed the driver of the car. Those are some pretty bad and nasty stories. Another one, down in Melbourne in the last 3 months, an overweight, grossly overweight box of some 29 tonne was on a side loader, and that side loader flipped, fell over and killed the driver of the side loader. So these issues are real issues. They're not just somebody breaking the law. People are getting killed. So Operation Steel is a very focused enforcement process of RMS, and they join with the local New South Wales Police and do extensive checks of all container vehicles moving containers. 4 separate operations. I've actually just recently finished a 5th, and I haven't got the results of those yet. Inadequately secured containers on trucks was one of them. We've got some problems here in Sydney with some of our quality of our carriers that are servicing the port. As I mentioned, incorrectly loaded containers. When you open a door, and we had to go through, RMS and the police have had to go through all sorts of processes with customs to open export boxes that have got seals ready to be exported and import boxes that are still under bond. But the number of incorrectly loaded containers is of major concern. And fortunately that's not here in Sydney, but that gives you the sort of indication of what can occur with incorrect restraints inside of containers. WIM process, the weigh and motion process. So it's around all trucks carrying imports must weigh. As soon as the container's on the back of a truck, it processes around to the weigh and motion and gets its weigh ticket and then exports and then exits the terminal. I'll go through the warning process and how they're determined shortly. Depending on the severity of the loading of the truck, if it's minor, substantial or severe, it depends on what happens to it. If it's minor or substantial, that is minor is 5%, up to 5% overweight, up to 20% substantial, and over 20% severe. Minor and substantial, they must, by law, then proceed to a container freight station, which is located in the port precinct of their choosing, to have that load corrected. And that correction of the load can be either removal of the container, or sometimes it's just swapping the container end for end to satisfy the weighing requirements. If it's over 20%, the truck reverts back into the terminal, and the container terminal stevedores offload the container. Invariably, when we get those, they will exit the terminal eventually by rail. By enforcement processes, the drivers must retain these weighbridge tickets. I won't go into some of those details, but there's a light arrangement and I'll show you some photos of those. The Port Botany Precinct, these numbers here are the various weigh stations around the precinct. DP World Outgate, they come out. They've got a number of various opportunities to go to the freight stations for rectification. Same with Patrick, and now same with Sickle or Hutchison. They've got the ability, all these carriers, to go there. So we've got a network of good container freight stations that are able to rectify any load inconsistencies. A quick look at DP World Terminal. 3 weigh and motion lanes. Of note is the gap between these. Pads are just located in the ground. The gap between those creates a little bit of a problem, but I might say lane 3 is for out of gauge loads to go through, so it's not bad. But drivers, some people say that truck drivers, aren't your sharpest tools in the shed. Well, I reckon they're pretty clever because they can get around these things. They can cheat them, and when they can find a way, they'll cheat them every time. And what they do is they'll come up to these weigh pads and they'll jam on the brakes. And what that does is it shifts your weight distribution from one set of axles to the next. Or they'll drive crooked down here and they'll drive offset of the ramps, which means you're not getting a true and accurate weigh. And they try it all. We're slowly getting to the bottom of it because we can see who's doing it. The gameplay. Now, at the end of the weigh bridge, there's a light arrangement here, which gives them the weights and the gross weight, and then there's some traffic lights here. Orange telling them it's less than 20%, i.e. it might be 5% breach or a 20% breach, up to a 20% breach. And a red light says, tough luck boyo, go around the block, we're going to take your containers off here. The weighbridge tickets give axle groupings as well as gross weights. And it tells them it's a red, so it's a grossly overweight, more than 20% out, go back to the terminal. Pretty simple operation, all automated. It's tied back into the TOS, so it's tied back into the containers that are actually on that truck. Patrick operates 4 weigh and motion scales. So we had 3 at DP World, 4 at Patrick. Every import container. Now, every import container represents around about 1.4 million TEU, close enough, of which they're about 50-50. Of course, we've got Sickle Hutchison coming on now. A slightly different approach for Patrick. both DP World and Patrick's approaches are acceptable to the Roads and Maritime Services. 4 scales. The interesting thing to note is, in fact, that they've really tightened the area and the gap between their barriers, so it is difficult for the drivers to drive off the scales. The important thing is that the trucks can only go at a maximum speed of 5 kilometres an hour. Stop well before the start of the bridge, select low, low, and go. So Patrick's approach is, we're not going to tell you whether you're 5% overloaded or 20% overloaded or grossly overloaded, because you as a transport operator know whether your truck is overloaded. We're going to tell you what the weights are, and you will decide whether you need to stay in the terminal or whether you need to go to the container freight stations for load rectification. And that process is working reasonably well. The only traffic lights that they've got there is if they haven't weighed properly. If it's an incorrect weigh or stop, don't come onto the weighbridge. So it's totally different. The other thing that Patrick has on there is the documented weight. So the documented weight for those containers is actually printed on the weigh station docket. And our friends at Sickdal, the new terminal, has 2 weighbridges. And they are configured very similar to DP World's. The big difference is they have got an overheight detector, which is another issue we have here in Sydney. We've got a number of tunnels and bridges, and it's amazing how often, on average probably about once a week, where one of the major arterial routes is blocked because some truck goes into a tunnel and it's too big for it. So we've got some warning devices there that I think are set at 4.3 metres. So anything that's over 4.3 metres triggers that off and immediately tells the driver he's over height. Those over height warning devices are being installed at the moment in Patrick with their remodelling of their terminal, and I understand are going to be fitted to DP World's terminal as well. And that's the sort of problem that occurs when an overheight truck goes into the tunnel. There is chaos and mayhem, and traffic backlogs last for hours and people get extremely frustrated. What's happening to the rest of the country? Brisbane, they have an automated weighbridge process there, but theirs is a fixed weighbridge. So that takes obviously quite a lot more time to go through a fixed weighbridge situation, but it is more accurate. The truck is photographed, weights are recorded, there's an automatic charging mechanism back to the carrier, and the carriers choose whether they use it or not. However, outside the gates of Port of Brisbane, the local roading authority, Queensland Main Roads, QMR, have recently installed some weigh motion scales. One coming into the port, one going out of the port. So every truck's going to be weighed, got to go across those WIMS. And then a block or 2 away from that area, they've got fixed weigh bridges ready. If they've got anybody over on their weigh in motion, then they get diverted to the fixed weigh bridge, where if they're found to be over there, they get prosecuted. Melbourne, after the incident of the 29-tonne box on the side loader where the driver was killed, they are currently exploring what they need to do in Melbourne. I believe they will be installing weigh in motion scales very, very soon. Some of our lessons learnt: it adds no more than 3 minutes per truck, and that's all. It's reduced overweight trucks on the road by 85% and uneven loadings by 52%. That's massive improvements. They're not the most accurate beasts in the world, but they provide a pretty good indication. And if the local enforcement authority is going to excuse me, want good enforcement policy, then there is room for a fixed weighbridge to be installed in the port precinct somewhere. Overheight warning advice at all terminals is a must going forward. And the interesting thing, given the focus on import containers, export containers, and what they've found in their enforcement processes, export containers will be coming up, and I can see all of those being weighed soon too. The consequences of those is likely to be, if you come to a terminal and you've got an export container and your truck is overweight, then the stevedore will not unload that container. We'll direct them to a container freight station for load rectification, and will advise the enforcement authority that there has been a breach. So I think that's what's going to happen around those. So that's it. Thank you.
So thank you, Steve, Shane, and Lutz. Time now for some questions. A little bit of time to spare, so grab a mic and ask a question or two if you've got something in mind. Anyone? Gentleman over here. I thought you might all have questions about this. It's coming.
A question for Steve. For the Brisbane export boxes being weighed, that I guess is only really there to detect the problem on the road, because obviously in terms of the terminal it's wanting to know the net weight of the container as opposed to the container plus the truck. So on the import you understand the way motion works as part of the regulation on the roads, but for the export, is that just a retrospective fine that will go to the operator for operating on the road overweight, as opposed to being an issue for the terminal, which will not be able to be determined by that weighbridge?
Correct. It won't be an issue for the terminal. It will be retrospective. But what they've found, what the RMS has found in their enforcement programs, is that they're, what do you call them, recidivist offenders. It's the same people that are offending all the time. So if you get one and you continually, and you're pinging them and you're fining them some pretty substantial fines for travelling on the roads overweight, then it's going to stop the practice.
Anyone else? One over here.
Hi, Jim Wilson, Lutz, Australia. A couple of quick, fairly simple questions. What's the penalty if you are overweight? Is there a financial penalty? Is there a possibility of jail time?
For me?
Sure.
So, import containers, if you're overloaded inside the terminal and you get a red, i.e. it's in excess of 20% overweight on your axle grouping or gross, you go back into the terminal to have those containers removed. The stevedores will charge the carrier $100 per container for taking those containers off. If you're less than 20% over and you have to go to a container freight station, then that is a commercial arrangement between the carrier and the container freight station. So there's no financial penalty. And RMS receives all the data that has occurred in those weighing processes, but they do not prosecute on that basis.
Is there any potential for criminal prosecutions and the imposition of penalty units?
Technically, I shouldn't answer that because it's not my area.
How much do the weighbridges cost, the weigh motion machines and the fixed weighbridges? And who pays for it, and is there any cost recovery?
So currently the cost recovery on all weighbridges at Port Botany is being charged back to the shipping lines. The shipping lines refute those charges and suggest that is not their responsibility, but currently that's where it lies. The individual cost of those weighbridges, I'm unsure.
And what's the cost recovery for the shipping lines?
I think it's about $5 a weigh, or $5 for every import container that comes in through the port.
So how much does that add up to in total over the course of a year?
Well, there's 1.4 million roughly TEU coming through, which equates to about a million. Yeah, a million lifts, $5 million.
Thank you very much.
Over here.
Henry van der Weijden, Port of Amsterdam. I don't understand quite. A container, when a driver is on the road in New South Wales, whether it's import or export, let's suppose it's an export container, can the driver be punished if the container is overweight?
Yes.
But there is in the law there is no obligation to weigh the container.
There is an obligation on the driver to ensure that the load and his vehicle in combination do not exceed the law.
So for export is also arranged then, actually.
And that's in fact, I guess what is a little unfair, because a lot of instances the drivers are going on the declared weight on the documents, and it says I've got a 24-tonne box. When he gets weighed up by the enforcement authorities, he finds the thing's 32 tonne. Now, and the driver will be prosecuted. The driver will be prosecuted. The company, the carrying company, will be prosecuted. And only recently have they gone back to the shippers to prosecute them as well.
Grant Gilfillan from Sydney Ports Corporation. I'll make a little bit of a comment and then I'll probably ask Steve and Shane if they want to verify or otherwise what I'm saying. And I'm speaking on behalf of what we've done here in Sydney, but also where IAPH sits with regard to this, because what we've done in Sydney with weighing of import containers is the bottom end of the problem. It's not the top end of the problem. It's not the answer, but it's all that the government felt it could do to rectify the problem with these overweight containers coming in. So it's put all of its focus into measuring import containers, whereas we know we should be putting our focus onto measuring export containers. But this is where we need the whole world to do this. If we don't get this IMO resolution through and have every country in the world, what Steve talked about, the ceramic tiles from Italy coming in, if in Italy they're not weighing containers before they leave, then the issue of the stability of the ship, which is what we in IAPH have a primary interest around, is not resolved. So we've got to get this the right way around. We've got to be measuring and ensuring in every country, literally, that before a box gets on the road to even get to the port to be exported, it needs to be compliant with gross mass and axle loadings. That is the crux of the matter. So we've got this at the moment probably the wrong way around, and you know, this is the challenge for us, is to make this happen around the world. This is what IAPH can do. So, comments on that?
Good summary.
And that's why I touched on it. The RMS is extremely concerned, not only about the export containers and the weight, but as I touched on before, the security inside the containers is the biggest risk to life and limb in this country, and it's a major cause for concern of how containers are being packed.
Fair Wandelaar, IAPH, very good morning. Afternoon, sorry. I could tell you a little bit on how it is arranged in a number of countries, but I think the most important example is the United States. The United States have a ruling, an OSHA rule, Occupational Safety and Health rule, that nothing shall be lifted unless the weight is known. They have solved the problem. Because if you pick something up anywhere in the supply chain, you've got to know the weight. So the weight is known. And that's the solution.
Yeah. Yeah.
Rob Fitzpatrick from NICTA. Question for Steve, Shane, and also the Hamburg example. Steve, you mentioned that information submitted to RMS. Can you talk a little bit about where information is being sent and when to shippers and from shippers, or to shipping lines or from shipping lines, etc.? Shane may have that.
I don't think that loop is closed, Rob. The data that RMS gets, if you can imagine, roughly 1,000 truck trips a day through each of the 2 stevedores. So let's say 2,500 truck trips through the port each day, through 3 stevedores. The amount of data that's going through, and it's going through in different formats to RMS. They have a devil's own job collating it and sifting through it for possible enforcement anyway. So, but there is no closed loop back to the shipping lines about what those weights could or couldn't have been. What the stevedores are doing with the shipping lines, however, I'm not sure. I'm unaware.
Someone over here.
Frans van Zoelen, Port of Rotterdam. I have a question for Lutz Birke. Thank you for your clear presentation. Could you elaborate a little bit more about your energy program as far as solar energy is concerned? You told something about those rooftops in the port area. Does it work? Your stimulating program in order to ask the companies over there to use solar energy? And have you already ideas how you do store the energy which is gained with that program? Thank you.
So is it on? Yeah. So we have a lot of roofs in the port right now. They have installed the solar panels on top, and we checked the other roofs in the port. So I think maybe 30% of the roofs we have in the port, they have already installed solar panels right now. So we want to get more. We want to have more roofs. And what we can do as Port Authority is that if we bring new companies in the port, then we say to them, you have to install on the buildings or on the buildings if you want to build new warehouses or something like this in the port. Storage is a big issue, definitely. So we discussed this topic with companies from Hamburg, like Siemens or other ones, to make some pilot projects, and we want to bring more pilot projects of storage, the energy from renewables in the port.
Shane, I'll ask you a question. Generally speaking, we've all read the figures over the years that anecdotally, there's no set figures, but anecdotally, overweight containers account for about 7%, some say up to 20% globally. If it's such a major safety concern, why is it taking so long to get him ratified?
Well, like a lot of these things, the International Maritime Organisation, it takes a long time to get items onto their agenda. And it really takes organisations such as IAPH as well as member states to actually get together and actually get to a common view on the problem and a way forward. And that's what has happened in the last couple of years, and we've finally got it onto the agenda of the IMO and it's progressing through. So unfortunately it does take time.
It's not sinister, it's just due process.
Unfortunately, yes.
Okay, good, thank you. Well, I think we'll conclude now. We're a little early, so a bit longer for lunch. Thank you all, and I'll ask you all to be back here at 2 o'clock. Thank you.